In order to maintain homeostasis, we have negative feedback mechanisms. So you need to be able to understand why it is called negative feedback. And you also need to be able to give me an example, as well as understand the components of the feedback mechanism. So we can talk about what is referred to as the stimulus. And it's important to realize that the stimulus could be both internal and external. So internally, it could be like the blood pH, the acidity of your blood. Externally, it could be a sound, or it could be temperature, an external stimulus. And so when we talk about the negative feedback mechanisms, they can be both internal and external, but generally they refer to internal mechanisms. So we have this stimulus, and it gets sent into, or it gets received by a receptor. So we're going to talk about receptors, but receptors are modified neurons that are able to take that stimulus energy and turn it into an action potential, which could then be actually sent to the control center. So we have a control center. Oftentimes that is the brain. And for things like blood pressure and heart rate and breathing rate, that is oftentimes the part of our brain that is referred to as the medulla oblongata or the hypothalamus. So it's the part of our brain that is unconscious. It's not something that we actually have to pay attention to. So this control center then sends it out to this information, or sends a message out to what is called an effector. So we have the receptor and we have the effector. The effector is what is going to cause a response to the stimulus. So we respond to the stimulus. And then that stimulus decreases. So we have a decrease in the stimulus, and hence that is why it is called a negative feedback mechanism. Okay, so if we look at an example like temperature regulation, you might have a drop in your body temperature. So I have recently taken up cold water dipping. So I get into the water, even when it's snowing outside, and I stay there for about 5 minutes, and my body responds to keep myself warm. So one way that your body responds to cold is to cause shivering. So if the stimulus is a decrease in body temperature, this is received by your receptors in your body that are thermoreceptors. They can detect temperature, and then it gets sent to the control center. So the control center for this is your hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus regulates our body temperature. It could send a signal out to your skeletal muscles to start shivering. This shivering increases body temperature. So it decreases the initial stimulus. So this is an example of a negative feedback mechanism. We could also look at what happens if your body temperature gets too high, and that would be causing you to sweat. So if your body temperature is too high, you would then send a signal to your sweat glands to start producing sweat, and then you would have evaporative cooling. The body heat would be released as your sweat evaporates off the surface of your skin and cools down your body. So this is an example of a negative feedback mechanism.